This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. Today I share one of a series of bite-sized pieces over the coming months. And this comes from episode number 12 of the podcast with my friend and colleague, Dr Alessia Bruno. And in this topic, the yips is what we refer to. And I'm thinking about it from a golf, cricketing or tennis angle as the summer in the UK starts soon and people get involved in these sports more and more. However, there are some overlap into other sports and into everyday life too, where very strong emotions and memories are stored, and arguably traumatic memories at that too. Now, the yips, as we know, can be catastrophic for many people. In terms of performance, yes, but also in terms of enjoyment and fun. And at a professional level, it can have a serious impact on the livelihood of people. So please enjoy Alessia's wisdom. Yeah, I see a lot where a putting stroke in golf has to be done perfectly. And that then causes anxiety, bad memories, and in some cases, in fact, in somewhere between 32 to 47% of serious golfers, they are then affected by the yips. Yeah. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Actually, yeah, it's a very important topic, especially in some sports, like baseball, snooker, and golf, as well as others, because they really, the yips are very debilitating. They really affect performance, and they feel they can't control them, and it's a type of performance anxiety. At the end of the day, it's really about feeling worried about your performance, and as we know, anxiety can have different level of intensity, and when it's very intense, can turn into a panic attack, which is all this symptoms, very physical symptoms, like dizziness, sweating, palpitation, shortness of breath, and the yips fit into the anxiety, the performance anxiety problem, because they are like some physical problems, like spasm, that they can have. And think about a golfer. I mean, if you can't control this motor skills, it's not gonna perform well, But then the more he tries to control it, the more rigidity creates into his body, and so it definitely doesn't perform well. And so it becomes like a vicious cycle. The more you get frustrated, the more you try to control, the more you tense up, and the more the task fails, basically. Something I wanted to say that actually some, as you probably heard as well, some famous athletes who didn't have Sasser, the baseball player, the American baseball player, was really became really famous for the yips problem. And, at that time, probably they weren't the right treatment for him. And he had to end his career prematurely. So let's think for a professional player, like a professional golf player, this is really debilitating, is a serious problem, and definitely needs to be addressed.
Thing is, as well, it can seep into other parts of their game. If they're a golfer struggling with the yips and the putting, it can then go into their chipping and into other areas and really affect them. And if, let's face it, if they're professional, then they're likely to have financial worries from it, and a whole range of things. They might end up giving up the sport. So it is a huge thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, because obviously for them, it's not like somebody has this yips in a different context. It's really it's really what you need to control, and the yips don't allow you to control what you need to control. And what you need to control is fundamental in order for you to progress in your career, and have a contract and continue to be a golfer. So there is a lot on stake for them. Yeah, it's really difficult.
And I know when I've personally experienced it a few times, it's like the the world stops, or it can feel like things just start happening at about 1,000 miles an hour. Your heart races, you're embarrassed because people are watching you, you're frightened. There's just so much to it.
Yeah, definitely, because in anxiety, like performance anxiety, which then can manifest with these yips, is very common. And if you think about what they go through, athletes, especially professional athletes, they have a lot of stake. They might have, they might train for so many years to go to the Olympic, or they might have a really important competition. They are frequently on newspapers and criticized, and they by fan, but they might not be able to have a new contract, and they feel all the pressure of everyone looking at them, feel judged. So it's quite overwhelming for them.
Are you able to explain what actually happens in the brain when this type of overload by fear occurs?
Yeah, something definitely happens in the brain. It's not out of the blue. Actually, there are very interesting processes when this fight or fly response occur, or freeze response in the worst scenario. We have a very primitive brain when it comes to danger. We are much like our ancestors, in a way, reptilian ancestors. But the difference with the animal kingdom is that after they experience like stressful events and traumas, in their case, maybe more like being eaten by a predator, they seem to, once the threat is over, to shake it off, like the energy. But the difference with us is that we seem to continue to store this energy in our brain. And this is when the symptoms flares up, when we manifest the yips or other blocks or panic attack. There are, just going back to the different parts of the brains that are involved with trauma and intensive fear. As you read about the limbic system, you might have heard of the hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus, thalamus, and all these different parts of the brain serves a function. So the thalamus, for instance, is like a central station. It's like a driveway of our brain, and kind of process all the incoming auditory and visual information from the external world. And then we have the cortex, which figures out whether something is threatening or not and needs further attention. We have the amygdala, that is like the fire station, that is like, it's really the center of fear and activates a fear response. And then we have the hippocampus, which is like the storage of memories. We also have the locus ceruleus, which is the part that sends all the different responses of fear, like increase in heartbeats, shortening of breath, sweating. And so what happened basically is when there are the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, which is really important, that turns off the alarming signal. So when we hear something or we see something, like something moving very fast or a very loud noise, we get scared first. And then the prefrontal cortex says, no, you don't need to worry about it. It's just a truck, it's nothing dangerous, it's just somebody who ran really quickly. And the first thing in order to for our species to survive is to get scared. We have to get scared first in order to survive, because we have, as I was saying before, we have this primitive brain, this very old ancient brain, the reptilian brain. And so in order for us to survive, we have to get scared first. And when we get scared, there are other areas like, for instance, the hypothalamus, which has connection with the pituitary gland and release cortisol. The cortisol is the hormone of stress. But then the release of this cortisol doesn't really allow memories to be stored correctly. So they get stored fragmented in a fragmented form. And this is when we have flashback, when we are not over a negative experience, because high level of cortisol, which interferes with the right storage of memories in the hippocampus, results in the person having the memory stored in a somatic form. So the person talks about a negative experience and gets activated. So might feel like very physical symptoms and physical discomfort, as if the situation was still happening, as if was still in the present. So with the technique I use, like Brainspotting or EMDR, what we do is to unblock this traumatic material in the brain, process it, and store it in a functional way so that when we think about it and when we talk about this traumatic experience, we don't get activated and we really feel it belongs to the past. When this doesn't happen, because it's too intense, or it's just one big event that is overwhelming, or there are consecutive smaller events, but it's like constantly getting stress, these memories don't get stored correctly. They are fragmented. And so physically, what happens physically, we go back to the sympathetic nervous system. We have this fight and flight response. But we have a fight and flight response also when the danger, the threat is not present, just because we feel it is still in the present. And just the thought of doing that competition, the thought of doing that hit, the thought of going to the same, football pitch where I had a bad injury, all this kind of stuff gets me activated. Although I might not experience any further negative, experience, but because it's in the present, we get activated all the time just by thinking about it, by talking about it, by reliving the situation with meeting people who belong to that specific trauma, or being in the situation and in the place where we experience the trauma. So when I saw a motorcyclist, he had a bad fall, and one of his friends as well during a race got really bad injured. It was in the clinical room with me, but just the thought of it got him really activated. You could see he was reporting his heart pounding, he was not breathing properly, he was hyperventilating, he felt dizzy, and we were not racing in that moment, but the experience was in the present. So it's really tricky how our brain works when something is really overwhelming. Yeah, but it needs to be processed so that the past is moved to the past and the athlete is free to perform, being focused and lucid in the present.
So if I was an athlete who's experiencing these type of challenges, issues, can you just talk me through what the process looks like when you're using EMDR or Brainspotting?
I'm going to mention about Brainspotting because it's really an effective treatment for performance anxiety or just traumas, because we know that some sports are really dangerous. As I said, cyclists can die, so there are really some dangerous sports. And how it would work? Well, first of all, I would give some psychoeducation. So I would explain about how the trauma is locked in the brain with this original intensity and the original charge, and that's why every time he thinks about it, it gets activated. And then it's very much in the body Brainspotting, and so be asking the person where it feels activated in the body, and then because Brainspotting treatment for the therapist work in this way and says where you look at how you feel, we will be searching in the visual fields for brain spot, which are spots in the visual field which direct access to where the trauma is stored in the brain. And then I will just leave in a mindful processing state the client and let him do what he needs to do in order to heal. And what happens is like a domino effect. And the same thing happening in EMDR, this domino effect, but with the EMDR is eye movement rather than eye fixation. And what happens is that there is this domino effect, this free association, as if the person is cleaning all the channels that are in the brain, which hold negative memories. And as they do that, with eye movement or with eye fixation, stop feeling the physical discomfort. And when they go back to the target or to the memory, to the topic, to that trauma, they don't feel activated anymore. Where the topic they wanted to, they came to see you for. It feels very far. It feels old, as if it doesn't belong to them, and they feel really free in their body. For instance, my motorcyclist was saying that it was there. It was in the zone. It was really focused. It was just following the flow. It was not thinking. It was not controlling. It was just there in the moment. And that is what athletes need, to be in the moment in order to perform. You can't think about the previous trauma. You can't have anticipatory anxiety about the future, competition when you have to perform in that specific moment, because to be in the zone is something instinctive. It's not something neocortical, it's something deep and subcortical.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed Alessia's insights. And if you are someone with the yips, there is hope. There certainly is. Personally, if I was supporting you, I'd look at things from a different angle. I'd most likely use sports hypnosis or solution-focused imagery to help you deal with such anxieties. I'd also look at ways that you train and practice. However, Alessia has a different skill set to me. She has these amazing additional tools in her locker in Brainspotting and EMDR. So, to reiterate, there is hope. You don't need to feel alone and helpless and simply look to change technique or equipment time and time again to beat the yips. Psychologists do have some answers there. They can help you get that smile back on your face when you do play. Feel free to tune in to episode 12 for more on this topic of the yips, and you'll also note some other episodes I've highlighted in the show notes can give you some helpful guidance in this area too. Our weekly newsletter, The Mental Edge, includes updates and advice, so you may want to sign up. Again, the details are in the show notes. Have a great week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.